Thank you. Senator Schatz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Duffy, for being here and for visiting with me. I want to sort of zoom out before we get into some details. The tradition of the position of Secretary of Transportation is kind of unique. You know, you had President Bush nominate a Democrat, Norm Mineta, President Obama nominate a Republican, Ray LaHood, and then a number of secretaries who had their clear partisan affiliations, Chow, Buttigieg, Fox, others, but once they got into the position, they just treated transportation like transportation. And so just in the big picture, I'd like for you to offer clarity to the whole committee and to your staff, your future staff, that you're going to continue in that long tradition of bipartisanship and really nonpartisanship as it relates to transportation policy.
I appreciate that question and give me a chance to talk about that. I don't think safety is a partisan issue. The projects that we talk about in your offices and we'll talk about today, those aren't partisan projects. Infrastructure is not partisan. And so I'm committed to working in a bipartisan fashion to make sure we are looking at the best projects and the safest record. I look forward to doing that. Because I think you mandated that I go to Hawaii to see you. We can do that together in Hawaii. It's the only state I haven't been to, and I think you said I should
Seems to me the entire committee needs to join on that trip.
I'll issue my demand letter shortly, yes.
I think you said in February or a March timeframe was what you wanted.
On IIJA, just to be very clear, it's a federal law, it was a bipartisan law, and I just want your assurance that in terms of releasing funds, that this will all be done on the level and not be intermediated by any political concerns.
Absolutely, you have my commitment.
Thank you.
It will be on the level.
I want to talk to you about tribal transportation. We've made actually a lot of progress on tribal transportation. That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is that we've basically abandoned this area of responsibility for the federal government for literally generations. There are 157,000 miles of road in the National Tribal Transportation Facility inventory. 60% of these roads are unpaved. 60% of these American roads are unpaved through many of the states of people on both sides of the aisle. What specific steps do you think the department can take to ensure that tribes have access to infrastructure investments, technical assistance, and decision-making process that are on par with state and local governments? Because the problem, right, is that we established this new policy to try to make to make inroads here. But if the requirements are as if you're interacting with a state Department of Transportation, some of these tribes are small, right? Yeah. Some of these tribes don't have a shop to do transportation and then a compliance piece and all the rest of it. So they really do need TA and not to be treated as if they are sort of interlopers into this transportation space.
Senator Boulder and I have a lot of tribes in the state of Wisconsin. I had 5 in my congressional district. We have more than 60% of our roads are paved, you know, in our communities on tribal land. I was speaking to Senator Lujan on this issue, and he voiced the same concern you do. So many of these roads aren't paved, and so I think you're right. Providing assistance, simplifying the process to make sure that our tribes can access money that's available to them to make sure they can build their tribal infrastructure and roads. It's an important part of the way I think about transportation and would welcome the chance to work with you on that.
You know, we've done this over the last couple of years, both with the bills that were passed on a bipartisan basis, some of the COVID relief, IIJA in particular, but even the bills that were passed on a partisan basis. We sort of changed our policy to put tribes at the table, Native people at the table, including Native Hawaiians and Alaska Natives. But the problem is, at the department, the program manager, the grant committee has never interacted with the tribes, and so their criteria ends up being the barrier to entry. And so I think you've got to kind of get into that thicket and start to clear some of the underbrush to make it. It's one thing for us to pass the bill. It's another thing for it to manifest itself in terms of getting this 60% of 150,000 miles of road are gravel. It's just unacceptable.
In the organizational chart, we do have a position here, and I've already thought about that, again, because it is a priority for me.
One final question, and this is something I've been working on a bipartisan basis for a long time. You know, you're going to be the Secretary of the Department of Transportation, not just the Department of Cars. And there's this kind of ridiculous fight, sometimes in this committee, but certainly in Congress, about pedestrians versus cyclists versus public transportation. Like, everybody is everything depending on what the situation is, right? You're in New York City, you're suddenly a public transportation user. Most people are also using sidewalks. Some people use bikes and cars and all the rest of it. And yet we fight as if these things are zero sum. And we just have a skyrocketing rate of pedestrian fatalities. And we have gotten into a place where, she agrees, we've gotten to a place where just fighting for the safety of pedestrians is somehow interpreted as like, I don't like cars. And I just would like for us to create a context in which we can all agree that pedestrian fatalities going up is a bad thing, and we should all work on that problem. It has nothing to do with your view about EV or public transportation or smart growth or climate. I just don't want people to get knocked over when they're trying to walk to the supermarket.
I agree with you. Pedestrians dying is a bad thing, and I would love to work with you on figuring out ways that we can make sure our roads are built safer, keeping our pedestrians, our bikers, maybe even the scooterers safe as well.
Thank you. Thanks for the extra time.
And I think we're all agreed now that